Title: Locals say the trees took them. We didn't believe it. Part 1. Introduction. They warned us not to go near the forest after dark. The locals, with their furrowed brows and trembling voices, spoke in whispers about people vanishing. Taken, they said, by the trees themselves. We laughed it off. Superstition, we called it. Fairy tales for the feeble-minded. But that was before the night the forest whispered my name. Before we realized that the warnings weren't just stories. They were pleas. Body. I had always thought of our new town, Grayson Hollow, as a peaceful escape, a quiet corner of the world where nothing ever really happened. A patchwork of cobbled roads, weathered barns, and houses that lean with the weight of their own history. My boyfriend Adam and I had moved here 3 months ago, chasing lower rent and a slower pace of life. What we found was something else entirely. The locals were kind but distant. They'd give you directions with a smile, but avoid eye contact. They never came out after dark, and every evening, like clockwork, an eerie silence blanketed the town as porch lights flicked on and doors bolted shut. We asked about the forest that bordered the northern edge of Grayson Hollow. Its ancient trees dark and dense, always swaying even when the wind was still. Don't go near them, old Mrs. Kellerman from next door had said. The trees aren't right. Adam chuckled. What does that even mean? They move. They watch. And when they want someone, they take them. Naturally, we didn't believe her. Who would? Trees don't move. They don't watch. And they certainly don't take people. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when mixed with arrogance. It started with a local news clipping I found while browsing the tiny library near Town Hall. A yellowed article from the 70s. Local teen disappears. Last seen near Mourner's Woods. The article quoted the missing boy's mother, who swore she heard his voice calling from the forest days after the search ended. But he never came back. I found more. Over a dozen cases spanning decades. Always the same location. Always the same end. No body, no clues, no explanation. The woods simply swallowed them. I showed Adam the clippings. Looks like an unsolved mystery gold mine, he grinned. We should film a vlog. Ghost hunters eat this kind of stuff up. I hesitated. What if it's real? Come on. Trees don't eat people, Liv. But there was something about those woods. The way the tree line seemed to shift slightly each time I looked at it. The way the birds refused to fly overhead. The dogs that barked relentlessly in that direction, then whined and ran home. Something wasn't right. We decided to go anyway. Just a short hike, we told ourselves. In and out before dark. Just enough for a few shots and maybe a spooky recording or two. We packed our gear and left just after lunch. The trailhead was marked by a faded wooden sign, half swallowed by creeping ivy. It read, Mourner's Woods. No maps, no warning signs. Just a path of trodden leaves that seemed to vanish into shadow too soon for midday. The deeper we walked, the quieter everything became. No birdsong. No rustling squirrels, just the sound of our footsteps and the occasional creak of old trees groaning like bones. We followed the trail for about half an hour, filming segments and joking around. Adam even faked a few ghost noises for effect. But as we moved deeper, the air turned thick, like breathing through syrup. The trees grew taller and denser, their trunks twisting unnaturally, their bark gnarled with shapes that looked too much like faces. Is it just me? I whispered. Were they leaning in? Adam frowned. Yeah, I was thinking that too. Maybe it's just the light. But it wasn't. The trees were leaning, watching, listening. That's when we heard it. A whisper. Soft, fragile, and unmistakably human. Liv. I spun around, heart hammering. Did you hear that? Adam's face had gone pale. Yeah. That sounded like you. No, I said slowly. It sounded like my mom. She'd been dead for 6 years. We stood there frozen, surrounded by a wall of trees that suddenly felt impossibly close. I turned in a slow circle. The trail was gone. We had walked a straight line. We hadn't veered once. But now, there was nothing but trees in every direction. Identical, suffocating, endless. I think we're lost, I said, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Adam pulled out his phone. No signal. He tried the GPS. The screen spun wildly, unable to locate us. We should go back, I whispered. We turned to retrace our steps. That's when the forest changed. The wind picked up, dry and cold, though no leaves moved. Whispers fluttered through the air, too many voices to count, overlapping and echoing. We walked faster, then faster still, until we were running, branches clawing at our arms, roots grabbing at our ankles. The trees were alive. They were aware. And then Adam screamed. I turned in time to see him being pulled backward, his foot tangled in what looked like roots, but they were moving, writhing like serpents, coiling up his leg and dragging him toward a hollow beneath a massive black tree. Liv, he shrieked. Help me? I grabbed his arms, yanking with everything I had. The roots hissed and tightened, pulling harder. He looked at me then, eyes wide, and whispered, It's inside the tree. I didn't know what he meant, but in that moment, I felt it too. A presence, not just watching. Hungry, with a final violent pull, the roots tore him from my grip and dragged him into the hollow. He disappeared. Gone. I screamed his name over and over until my throat bled, my fists pounding on the trunk that had swallowed him. But the tree stood still, its bark cold and silent. Then came the whispers again, this time louder, closer, familiar. Liv, come home. It was Adam's voice. But it wasn't. Part 2. I didn't sleep for days after Adam vanished. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hand slipping from mine, his face contorted in fear as the roots dragged him into that black hollow. The sounds, the whispers, the voice that followed me out of that cursed forest. The local authorities chalked it up to a hiking accident. Thick forest. People get turned around, they said, as if a grown man could just vanish into thin air. They mounted a half-hearted search party that never crossed the tree line, muttering excuses about dangerous terrain. No one would go in, not even the police. The townspeople barely looked surprised. It was like they'd already buried him. A week passed. Then 2. No sign of Adam. No progress. No closure. Just that forest, ever present, ever looming. From my bedroom window, I could see the tops of the trees, swaying in wind that didn't reach the streets. At night, I started noticing things. Shadows that moved against the tree line, lights flickering for no reason, animals standing still, watching my house. One night, I heard knocking. 3 soft raps on my front door at exactly 3:03 a.m. I froze, heart thudding. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. No one. But just as I turned away, I heard it. Liv. It was Adam's voice, but duller, like it was coming through layers of fabric. Or soil. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I knew it wasn't him. Whatever that thing was, it was wearing his voice like a mask. The next morning, I found 3 long scratches gouged into the wood of the door, like claw marks, but too high up for any animal. And there were no footprints. Just mud. Damp, rotting forest mud. Impossible, since it hadn't rained in days. I started digging deeper. If the locals wouldn't help, I'd help myself. I went back to the library, dug through archives older than the town itself. There were more disappearances than I thought. Dozens, some dating back to the 1800s. Names scratched out in ink, pages missing. People erased. And it always came back to that forest. Mourners' woods. And then I found something that chilled me. A leather-bound journal, torn and faded, tucked inside a box of donation materials. It was written by a man named Elias Barrow, one of the town's founders. The entries were dated 1823. The land moans at night. The trees, they drink the voices of the lost. A sacrifice must be made to keep the hunger at bay, one every winter, else it reaches out and takes who it wants. We marked the boundary with stones. No one must cross, not without offering. There was a map, faded, but I traced it with my finger. It showed something deep in the woods, a symbol that looked almost like a tree, but twisted into a spiral, its roots like veins, a heart buried in bark. That night, I started hearing the voices again, this time from inside the house. They whispered from vents, from under the sink, behind the walls. Liv, come back. Help me? I covered every mirror. I left every light on. I stayed awake for 3 days straight. On the 4th, I passed out on the couch just before dawn. When I woke up, the windows were open, every single one. The house smelled like wet soil. And there, in the living room, was Adam's camera, the one he was holding when the forest took him. It was caked in mud. Dead leaves clung to the strap, but it still worked. Hands shaking, I plugged it in and turned it on. The screen flickered, then played. It showed us entering the forest, laughing, carefree. Then the deeper trek, the whisper, his scream, the roots. But the footage didn't stop where I remembered it. It kept going. I was in the last part. The camera, still running, had landed on its side. It captured Adam being dragged into the hollow, just before total darkness filled the lens. Then silence. Then breathing, slow rasping. Then a voice right next to Mike. She is marked. Then static. I dropped the camera. Something behind me moved. I spun, heart pounding. Nothing, but the shadows in the room didn't feel right anymore. They stretched wrong, moved even when I didn't. The walls felt like they were breathing. I left the house that day. I couldn't stay in it. I checked into the only motel in town, one run by a frail, elderly man named Howard who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. When I told him my name, he flinched. "You're the one the trees want now," he whispered. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to hide my trembling hands. He looked around, then motioned for me to follow him into the back room. Dusty books lined the shelves. Strange symbols scrawled on the walls. "There's something you need to understand," he said. "Mourner's Woods isn't just a forest. It's a threshold, a door. It feeds, but it doesn't feed alone." "On what?" I asked. "On grief," he said. "On longing. You went into that forest looking for a thrill. It gave you loss. Now it wants you back. You're marked." He pointed to the camera I held in my lap. "It returned that to you, not out of kindness. It's bait. You're part of it now, part of the story." I didn't want to believe him, but I felt it too. The pull, the strange dreams of trees with mouths, of roots twisting through my veins, of Adam, eyes blank, whispering from behind bark. Howard told me there was one person left in town who had entered Mourner's Woods and come back alive, a woman named Ruth Calder. She lived near the outskirts of town alone, in a rusted farmhouse surrounded by iron fencing and salt lines. She went in looking for her son, he said. That was 40 years ago. I went to her the next morning. The house was surrounded by dead earth. Not a single blade of grass grew near it. A black dog lay under the porch, growling softly as I approached. Ruth answered the door with a shotgun in her hands and a fire in her eyes. "You've been touched," she said, before I could even speak. I begged her to help me, told her about Adam, about the voices, the journal, the camera. She let me in. The inside of her home was a fortress, salt at every entrance, crosses made of iron nailed to the walls, charms I didn't recognize hanging from the ceiling. "I went in," she said, her voice a rasp. "I saw what's inside. It's not a forest. It's a body, a mind. Every tree is a vein, every root a nerve, and its heart is buried deep. That's what calls to you. That's what wants you. How do I stop it?" I asked, desperate. "You don't," she said. "You survive it, or you don't." She told me about the spiral tree, the one at the heart of the forest. It's older than this town, older than this land. The settlers built around it, thinking they could tame it, but they were wrong. The spiral marks the place where the veil is thinnest, where it feeds. Ruth pulled out an old map. The same symbol I saw in the journal was etched into it, twisted, gnarled, pulsing with some strange, ancient gravity. "You want answers?" she asked. "You want him back? Then that's where you go." I didn't want to go back. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to forget, but I couldn't, because something inside me knew I had to. The forest hadn't finished with me, and I hadn't finished with it. Part 3. The forest greeted me like it had been waiting. Its trees stood impossibly still as I crossed a boundary marked by old stones and half-buried sigils. The air changed the moment I stepped over. The temperature dropped, and sound itself seemed to muffle like I'd stepped into a vacuum. Even my breathing felt wrong, as if the forest didn't want me to exhale. Ruth's map was clutched in my shaking hand. The spiral tree, that was where I was headed. The heart of Mourner's Woods. The place where Adam had disappeared. Where all of them had disappeared. I had packlight, a flashlight, water, salt, a knife I didn't really believe would help, and Adam's camera, still holding the final footage, still caked in dead leaves and grief. I don't know why I brought it. Maybe it felt like a piece of him. Or maybe I wanted to see what the forest would do when it realized I had taken back something of its own. The deeper I walked, the stranger became. Birdsong vanished completely. Even the wind seemed to stop. The trees weren't just tall here. They leaned inward, their trunks curving like they were watching me. Some bent so low their branches grazed the ground like hands dragging their fingers through the soil. I walked for hours. Time didn't pass right. My watch stopped ticking after 30 minutes, but the sun didn't move either. A pale light filtered through the canopy, but it never changed. A dull gray that settled into everything like dust. Eventually, I found something unnatural. A clearing, but not empty. In the center stood a series of wooden poles, tall and thin, each carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Around the base of every pole were bones. Animal bones at first glance, but some looked too long, too human. And there were clothes. Shredded, faded, a child's shoe, a wedding ring, a phone case. They weren't just taken. They were kept. Suddenly, I heard it again. A low hum, deep and resonant, like a voice filtered through stone. I turned slowly. Behind me stood one of the trees, but it had changed. It was breathing. The bark shifted with the rhythm of lungs, rising and falling. Knots in the wood flexed like eyelids. And then it opened. An eye, impossibly human, blinked once, then locked onto me. I ran. Branches whipped at my face. Roots shifted beneath my feet, trying to trip me. The forest didn't want me to leave now. I had wandered too far in. But I ran blind, not caring where I went, only away. That's when I found the first one. A man, or what was left of one, fused into a tree. His skin had turned to bark. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and his eyes were still wet, still blinking. His arms had been pulled back behind the trunk. Fingers splayed. It was like the tree had grown around him. He looked at me. His lips moved. "Help me!" I screamed. I backed away, but the forest kept showing me more. Another body, then another. Some looked fresh, others half-rotted, moss growing from their wounds. All part of the trees, grown into them, like the forest didn't just kill them. It absorbed them. This was what Ruth meant. It wasn't a place. It was alive, and it was feeding. I forced myself to keep moving. I followed the map until I found it. The spiral tree. It towered above the rest, black bark slick like oil. Its branches twisted into the sky in spirals, and its roots stretched outward like tendrils, buried into the soil but writhing, slow and deliberate, like veins under skin. There were no birds, no bugs, no sound at all, just a tree. And standing in front of it was Adam. He was barefoot, pale. Mud streaked his arms and chest. His eyes were open but blank. His lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. "Adam!" I cried, stumbling toward him. He didn't react. I got closer, close enough to see that his feet weren't on the ground. They hovered inches above it, held there by roots wrapping gently around his ankles, swaying him like a puppet. His head turned toward me, slow and unnatural. "Live," he said. But it wasn't his voice. It was layered, echoed, like a dozen voices speaking through him all at once. Men, women, children, all whisper my name. "Live, live, live." I backed away. The spiral tree pulsed behind him. Its trunk open like a mouth, revealing a hollow so black it felt endless. "You came," the voices said. "I came for him." I shouted, "Let him go. He is home." The roots moved, reached, slid toward me like snakes under leaves. I threw the saw from my pack in a wide arc, and the roots hissed, recoiling. Adam's head twitched. "He still remembers you," the forest said, "but not for long." "What are you?" I demanded. The tree answered with silence. And then came the screaming, not from the forest, from within me. Memories that weren't mine flooded my brain. Images of ancient rituals, people kneeling before trees, blood-soaked soil, voices chanting in forgotten tongues. A girl buried alive, a man devoured by bark, a town built on stolen land, cursed from the first stone. I dropped to my knees, clutching my skull. It was showing me, feeding me its past. And in that flood of horror, I saw something new, a way to undo it, a memory of fire. The tree feared fire. I staggered to my feet, pulled out the matches from my pack, lit one, held it to the edge of the camera's strap. It caught quickly. I hurled it at the spiral tree. The bark screamed, not creaked, not cracked, screamed. The hollow pulsed, and Adam dropped like a stone. The roots recoiled. The ground shook. I grabbed him, shaking him hard. "Adam, wake up." His eyes flickered, focused. "Live." We ran. We didn't look back. Behind us, the tree howled. The fire spread fast, too fast, like it had waited for this, begged for it. Branches caught like tinder, and a sound like thousands of voices shrieking in pain filled the air. We reached the edge of the woods just as the fire turned the sky orange. We collapsed on the grass, gasping, coughing alive. Adam wept. I held him, and we stared as the forest burned behind us. But even then, even as the flames danced high into the sky, I heard it, a whisper carried on the wind. "You burned the skin, not the heart." Part 4. The fire had raged through the night. Even from miles away, we could see the glow in the sky, a hellish dome above Mourner's Woods. We stayed in my car on the roadside, wrapped in silence, every muscle in our bodies aching with exhaustion and dread. Adam hadn't spoken much after we escaped. He just stared into nothing, his lips twitching like he was still mouthing the forest secrets. But I couldn't sleep, because the forest wasn't done. We had burned it, but it hadn't screamed in death. It had screamed in pain. And pain doesn't always mean death. The whisper still echoed in my head. "You burned the skin, not the heart." By morning, the fire crews arrived, but they never made it in. The ash was too thick. The roads into Mourner's Woods were gone. Trees had collapsed across every path, almost like the forest had orchestrated it, to hide the scar. They called it a freak fire, blamed it on dry weather, even though we'd had rain all week. But I knew better. We had lit the match, yes, but the forest had let it burn, to show us what pain looked like, to remind us what was beneath. Adam barely ate over the next few days. He flinched at every rustling leaf, refused to go near trees. I thought maybe he was traumatized. That time would heal him. Then the sleepwalking started. The first night, I woke to find the front door wide open and Adam standing barefoot in the yard, facing the woods beyond the hill. Just standing, still, silent. His mouth moved slightly, whispering things I couldn't understand. I brought him inside. He didn't remember anything the next morning. On the second night, he was in the kitchen, carving something into the table with a fork. Circles, spirals, the same pattern I'd seen on the spiral tree's bark. I took him to a doctor. They called it trauma-induced dissociation, PTSD, maybe even a mild seizure disorder. But I'd seen what the trees could do. This wasn't medical. This was residual. I started recording him. At night, while he wandered a house in silence, I set up my phone. I watched him walk in his sleep to the mirror, press his hand against the glass, and whisper, "It's still inside." I showed the footage to Ruth. She looked older, frilier. Her hands trembled as she watched the video. And when Adam's voice echoed through the speaker, she flinched. "He brought something back," she whispered. "What does that mean?" I asked. "You remember the old stories?" she said. "The ones about people who came back, but weren't the same?" I nodded slowly. They didn't just disappear. The forest consumes them, digests them, What comes back isn't whole. The forest holds onto pieces. Thoughts, memories, souls. It plants them. So what do I do? She looked at me, her eyes glassy. You go back, before it roots too deep. I was tired of that answer. Tired of hearing go back. Every time someone went back, they didn't return. I had been the exception. Maybe because I fought. Maybe because the forest let me win. But Adam hadn't fought. He had been taken. And now, even outside the woods, it was still feeding through him. That night, he vanished. I woke up to an empty bed, the sheets still warm, the front door unlocked, his shoes gone. I didn't panic. I knew where he'd gone. Mourner's Woods was still burning in patches. Smoke hung over the land like a veil. But the trees were growing back, faster than they should. Whole groves had already returned, black bark gleaming with moisture, leaves uncurling like fingers. I followed the map again, even though most of it was useless now. The fire had changed the landmarks, but some things remained. The spiral tree. I found its remains, charred and cracked, but it was still standing. Its branches had been burned off and its hollow mouth had closed, but roots still throbbed beneath the soil, pulsing like veins. And Adam was there, kneeling before it. Not alone. Others stood with him. A dozen, maybe more. Faces familiar from missing persons flyers. A girl in a tattered cheerleader uniform. A man with a delivery badge still pinned to his shirt. An elderly woman with scorched slippers. All of them swaying gently like trees in windless air. All whispering. Their eyes were white. I didn't call out. I didn't move, because the tree opened. Not its mouth. Its trunk. A vertical slit, wide and pulsing, splitting slowly down the center. The inside was alive. Wet, pink like flesh. The bark peeled outward like muscles separating. From the darkness within, something stepped out. It was me, or at least, it looked like me. Same face, same hair, same trembling hands. But the eyes were black, mouth wrong. The thing smiled, cocked its head, and said, "You came back." I stumbled backward, heart hammering. "What are you?" I whispered. "We are the echo," it said, stepping closer. "We are what the forest remembers. You burn the skin, but the memory remains." It touched Adam's shoulder, and he sank to the ground. "You took something," it said. "Now we take something in return." I didn't mean to take him. You lit the fire. You broke the silence. Now the forest must speak louder. The others stepped forward, their mouths widening unnaturally. From their throats came sound, not words. A low, droning scream. It made my vision blur, my ears bleed. I fell to my knees. But I still had the knife. Not silver. Not magical. Just steel. I hurled it at the spiral tree's heart. It struck something. And the tree roared. Not screamed. Roared. The world shook. Roots burst from the ground, whipping like tentacles. The fake me shrieked and dissolved into mist. The spell broke. Adam gasped, his body spasming. The others blinked confused, as if waking from a long sleep. "Run." I screamed. Some obeyed. Others didn't. They just fell lifeless. Adam grabbed my arm, and together we sprinted, dodging roots, ducking branches. The forest was angry now. Furious. The path back seemed longer, harder. But we emerged, stumbled into sunlight. And behind us, Mourner's Woods began to change. The trees bent backward, cracking. The soil collapsed inward. A sinkhole opened where the spiral tree had stood, swallowing the land around it. We stood on the edge, panting, watching as the forest folded into itself, like it had decided to retreat, to wait. Part 5. It was over. Or, that's what I kept telling myself. The spiral tree was gone, swallowed by its own heart. The clearing where Adam and the others had stood was now nothing but scorched dirt and ashes. The sinkhole had stopped growing, though every now and then I swore I could still hear it whispering from the depths. We didn't speak much after that. Adam changed. Again. He wasn't catatonic like before. He didn't sleepwalk or whisper at night. But he was quiet in a new way, like something inside him had closed permanently. His eyes would drift when we talked, like he was watching things behind me, things only he could see, and I knew better than to ask. A week passed. Then, too, the world moved on, as it always does. The news cycle shifted to politics, missing hikers, freak lightning storms. Mourners Woods was officially labeled a natural disaster zone. Barriers were placed at every entrance. Researchers tried to examine the soil. None of them stayed longer than a day. Something about equipment interference. That's what they told the public. What they didn't say was what I found in our mailbox one morning. An envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph. An aerial shot of the woods, taken that very week. The trees had returned. Fast. Too fast. New growth had risen where the sinkhole had been. Taller, darker, denser. Not natural. Almost geometric. Like the forest had rebuilt itself with intent. And in the center of the photo, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was the spiral tree. Whole. Unburned. I stared at it for hours, until Adam took the photo from my hands, tore it in half, and tossed it into the fire. Neither of us said anything, but I could feel it. The forest wasn't done. That night, I dreamed I was in the woods again, except it wasn't a dream. Everything felt real, the air, the damp soil, the weight of silence. I walked between rows of trees that looked like bones, bark stripped of the white beneath, twisted upward like spines. And then I saw her, Ruth. She was standing in front of the spiral tree, staring up at it. Only now it wasn't just a tree. It had grown. Huge. Towering. Its trunk pulsed like a throat. Its roots moved like veins beneath transparent skin. She turned to me and said, "It never ends. It only sleeps." I woke up gasping, the taste of moss still on my tongue. Beside me, Adam lay stiff, hands clutching the blanket. His eyes were open, unblinking. "Adam," I whispered. He turned his head slightly. His voice was soft, distant. "It's calling again." I couldn't do it again. I couldn't go back. So I made a different choice. We left, packed what we could, sold the house, and disappeared. Changed names, cities, lives. We moved to a place without woods, just dust and open sky, somewhere the trees couldn't reach. Or so I thought. For a while, things were better. Adam started to smile again. He took a job at a local bookstore. We ate dinner on the porch, listening to the wind roll over empty fields. Sometimes we even laughed, but the wind carried whispers, and the shadows outside weren't always shaped right. One evening, I came home to find Adam standing in the backyard, staring at a single sapling that had sprouted near the fence. Just one, thin, unremarkable, except it hadn't been there the day before. "Did you plant that?" I asked. He didn't answer. I tried to dig it up the next morning, but no matter how deep I went, I couldn't find the roots. That was the first. Over the next week, more appeared, thin at first, then thicker, then bark darker than it should have been, branches twitching in windless air. I called the city. They said it was a natural regrowth. Fast, but not impossible. They didn't see the bark. They didn't hear the whispers. They didn't see the spiral symbol forming in the soil. I confronted Adam one night, asked him if he'd heard it again. He nodded slowly. "It's not calling me this time," he whispered. "It's growing me." I felt cold all over. "You brought it here," I said. He looked at me, guilt, pain, something else in his eyes. "I didn't mean to, but it followed you." "No," he said. "It grew through me." The next morning, he was gone. The back door open, his footprints in the grass. They stopped at the edge of the trees. Yes, trees. The saplings were now tall enough to block the sun. An entire grove had formed the backyard overnight, dense and dark. I stepped in. The air changed. Everything muffled. Thicker, like the forest had brought its silence with it. I followed the path I hadn't created. And there, in the center, was Adam. But not Adam. He was part of the tree now. No, he was a tree. His face in the bark, mouth open in an endless scream. His hands stretched as twisted limbs. Fingers spread like desperate roots. He blinked. He saw me and whispered, "Help." I tried to pull him out, clawed at the wood, screamed, but the tree bled, and the blood burned. Behind me, I heard more trees growing, cracking, unfurling. The forest had followed us. No, it had been inside him all along. I left him there. There was nothing else to do. Burning it wouldn't stop it. Cutting it would only make it bleed. The spiral tree had planted its seed in him, and it had bloomed. And now I live in a high-rise. No trees, no plants. I don't even keep flowers. But the city is changing. Yesterday, I saw a vine growing from a crack in the pavement. It had leaves shaped like eyes. People are disappearing again, and in my dreams, the spiral spins, and spins, and spins. They said the trees took them. We didn't believe it. Now we're the roots. And you, reading this, hearing this, feeling this, you're already growing. You just don't know it yet. Part 6. It began again with the birds. They stopped singing. It's a subtle silence at first. Something you only notice because it's too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. I woke one morning to find the city choked in fog. The skyline, normally sharp and glittering, was nothing but smudged shadows. I looked down from my 18th floor window, expecting to see the normal chaos of downtown traffic. But the streets were empty, not just quiet, abandoned. I opened my balcony door. The air felt thick, earthy and wet, like a forest after a heavy storm. But there were no forests here, just concrete. And yet, I smelled pine. I went downstairs. The elevator lights flickered the entire way. When the doors opened, the lobby was dark. The power was out. My footsteps echoed too loudly on the marble floor. I walked to the entrance and pushed the glass door open. I froze. Vines. Everywhere. Thick, twisting ropes of green crawling up the building's face like veins. Leaves the size of dinner plates covered the sidewalk. Tree roots bulged from the pavement like tumors. One traffic light had been snapped in half by a thick branch, which now pulsed slowly, as if breathing. I turned back into the lobby. My phone buzzed. One message, from an unknown number. It simply read, "It's awake." I tried to leave. Of course I did. Packed what I could in a backpack. Grabbed the emergency cash and one of Adam's old notebooks. I slipped out through the underground parking lot, climbed over a half-collapsed gate, and ran. But there was nowhere to go. The city was gone. Not destroyed. Not ruined. Reclaimed. Trees now grew from buildings like tumors. Cracked windows oozed sap. Balconies had become nesting places for writhing brambles that curled like fingers. A subway entrance was swallowed by moss. Even the sky had changed, more green than blue, like sunlight filtered through leaves that shouldn't exist. And the people? They weren't screaming. They were singing. A slow, low hum echoed through the buildings. I recognized the tune, the spiral song. Adam used to hum it when the forest first touched him. Now the whole city was humming. I ducked into an alley, tried to think, trying to breathe. My heart was pounding so loud it hurt. I didn't know it was real anymore. Every time I blinked, the world looked different. Shadows moved. Trees leaned in when I wasn't watching. Graffiti twisted into spirals when I turned my head. Then I saw her, Ruth. She stood at the end of the alley, barefoot, hair hanging in damp curls, eyes blank. "You're not dreaming," she said softly. "Not this time." I took a step back. She walked forward. They always come back to the roots. I whispered, "You're dead." She smiled. "You keep using that word. But the forest doesn't end. It remembers." I turned and ran, but her voice followed me. "You can't run from what's inside you." I made it to the outskirts of the city, what was left of them, beyond the crumbled highway and fallen power lines. I saw the real forest, not the city forest, the origin, Mourner's Woods. Its edges had grown sharp like teeth. No birds, no animals, just that low humming vibrating in my bones. And at its heart, I could feel it, the spiral tree, calling. Again, I knew I had to go back. I knew it before I even stepped into the tree line. Because whatever this was, whatever Adam had become, whatever had followed me across towns and lives and memories, it would never stop unless I ended it at the root. The root was always a spiral tree. The deeper I went, the more time unraveled. Sunlight bent the wrong way. Shadows moved independently of their owners. I passed a clearing where children played, only to realize they were made of bark and vines. They giggled, but the sound came from the ground. At one point, I saw a deer with antlers made of hands. It watched me as I passed, not with fear, with recognition. And then, finally, I reached the center. The tree. It had changed. No longer thin and tall. Now it was massive, almost cathedral-like. Bark split open in places to reveal glowing amber veins. It breathed. It moaned. The spiral carved into its trunk pulsed like a heartbeat. And around it, gathered like worshippers, were the taken. Hundreds of them. Faces I knew, faces I didn't. All fused with the forest. Their bodies part plant, part human. They didn't move. They didn't blink. Except one. Adam. He stepped from the crowd of the rooted. His skin glistened with dew. His hair had grown long, tangled with leaves and petals. His eyes were fully green now. No whites. No pupils. And yet, I knew it was him. He smiled. I've been waiting. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. This isn't you. You said you wanted to stop it. I did. I do. But you don't understand. He stepped closer. It's not evil. It's ancient. It doesn't want to destroy. It wants to remember. And we forget. Always. I backed away. You brought this on them. No, he said gently. You did. The tree pulsed behind him. Loud. Hungry. You carried it. When I burned. When I bled. It left me and went into you. That's why you never really left. My hands began to shake. I looked down. Roots had started growing from my fingertips. I screamed, ripped them out. Blood sprayed. But they grew back faster, thicker. My veins itched. My vision blurred green. No, I whispered. No, no, no. You've always been part of it, Adam said. You just didn't know. The tree opened behind him, split like a mouth. The spiral inside was endless. You don't have to be afraid, he said. Let go. I turned to run, but I didn't, because I knew he was right. The forest wasn't chasing me. It was me, and now it was time to go home. Part 7. The spiral opened, and I stepped through. It didn't feel like walking. It felt like unraveling. Every step forward stripped something from me. Memories, names, shapes. My skin tingled, bones humming with vibrations I couldn't explain. I wasn't dreaming. This was deeper than a dream. It was remembering something older than memory itself. Inside the tree, there was no time, just motion. The spiral didn't end. I kept walking. At first, I thought I was alone, but then I heard the others. Footsteps in sync with mine. Whispered voices in 100 different languages, all saying the same thing. Come back to the root. I passed roots as thick as subway tunnels, pulsing with a faint golden light. They stretched into infinite blackness. I passed bones wrapped in vines, some human, some not. Faces peeked out from bark, half-formed, eyes blinking slowly like newborns. And always that humming. Low, alive, calling. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes? Days? Eventually, the spiral ended. Or maybe it didn't. It just became something else. I stepped into a vast chamber. Above me, the ceiling swirled with amber constellations. The walls were layered bark, like tree rings counting eons. And in the center, floating like a heart, was a seed, the size of a man. It glowed faintly, golden veins threading through it like lightning frozen mid-strike. Adam was already there, kneeling beside it. It's dying, he whispered. I stared at the seed. It didn't look dead. It looked powerful, timeless. What is it? The first root, Adam said, the beginning of all forests, the memory of the earth before man. I stepped closer. The light from the seed warmed my face. But why me? because it touched you, because you listened. Even when you ran, you heard it. I shook my head, tears building. I didn't want this. I just wanted to forget. That's the problem, he said. We all forgot. That's why it's dying. I looked around. Faces were forming in the walls. Watching. Waiting. You want me to save it? No, he said. It wants you to join it. My body started to change again. This time I didn't fight. The roots slipped under my skin like threads being stitched. My blood thickened. My breath tasted like loam. My heartbeat matched the pulse of the spiral tree. And suddenly, I saw everything. The spiral opened not just backward, but outward. I saw other forests, other worlds, other selves. Me as a child, running through mourners' woods. Me as an old woman, whispering stories to vines. Me as something not quite human, watching the stars fall. I saw the earth crying out as it was stripped, burned, forgotten. The trees had taken people not out of malice, but out of desperation. They needed memory. They needed witnesses. But something was wrong. The seed flickered. Adam gasped, clutching his chest. His skin began to crack. Amber leaked from his mouth. It's too late, he whispered. The forgetting, it's too strong. I grabbed his arm. No, there's still time. His eyes were green fire. You have to become it. The vines coiled around me. Gentle, firm. I reached toward the seed and touched it. The moment my fingers made contact, I felt myself dissolve, not in pain, but in expansion. My mind scattered into 1,000 leaves, carried by winds older than language. I felt roots digging into my memories, pulling them down into the soil, not erasing, planting. And then, light. When I woke, I was back in Mourner's Woods. The spiral tree stood tall again, bark glistening, whole. The forest was quiet, peaceful. I looked down at my hands. Still human, but something pulsed beneath the skin. The forest had given me back. Changed, branded, not taken, but chosen. I walked through the trees, and they leaned away, parting like a curtain. Birds sang again. The air smelled like rain. And then I saw them, the others, not rooted, not twisted, walking, living, saved. They smiled at me as they passed, eyes shining faintly green, whispering the spiral song under their breath. The forest was no longer hunting. It was remembering. At the edge of the woods, I found Adam, or something of him, a tree, tall and narrow, with bark that shimmered in the light. His face was in the trunk. Calm, at peace. He had become memory. I touched the bark gently. Thank you. The leaves rustled, as if in response. Then the wind shifted. I heard cars, laughter, civilization. The world was still out there. But now, I was different. I carried the forest inside me, its voice, its purpose, its warning. I walked back into town. People stared. News cameras turned. They'd all seen the city swallowed in vines. They'd seen the buildings rot and bloom overnight. Now it was all gone. The trees had receded. The concrete returned, but not the same. Every wall now bore faint spirals. Every tree whispered names. And every night, in their dreams, people heard a song. Low, ancient, calling them back to the root. The forest wasn't done. It had just begun to wake. Part 8. The news cycle struggled to explain what had happened. Scientists offered theories, hallucinations, fungal outbreaks, mass hysteria. Others blamed electromagnetic anomalies or experimental government tech. But no one could explain how a forest could rise overnight and then vanish just as quickly, leaving behind perfectly intact streets marked with spirals. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel it. But the forest had left a mark. It was subtle at first. The way people paused before entering parks. The way children stared longer at trees, as if listening. Pets refused to go near wooded trails. Local flora grew faster, denser, more vibrant. In Mourner's Hollow, the ground still smelled like fresh rain, even when it hadn't rained for days. I thought I could live with it, pretend to be normal. But something inside me was changing again. I started hearing them at night. Not voices, roots. whispering underneath the floorboards, calling me, reminding me. I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails and leaves on my pillow. The forest wasn't done with me. It had seated itself inside me. I tried to stay busy, back at my job, small talk with friends, grocery runs, but I'd catch glimpses, faces press against trees, spiral patterns in strangers' eyes, streetlights flickering when I passed. I stopped going to therapy. What would I say? I merged with the tree god, and now I can hear the forest breathing. Every now and then, I'd dream of Adam, or the thing he became. Sometimes he was still human, telling me things I didn't want to hear. Other times he was a spiral tree, his bark moving like skin, his voice coming from deep within the roots. They're coming, more than before. I'd wake up choking on sap. I kept a notebook of strange happenings around town. It wasn't just me. Local boy vanished on his way home from school. Search dogs refused to enter the wooded area nearby. A tree grew through the floor of a gas station bathroom overnight. An elderly woman claimed her late husband came back through the elm in her backyard and talked to her until sunrise. Half the town's roses bloomed black. Each event was followed by whispers of the woods and stories the town had tried to forget. The trees had taken people before, but now they were giving something back. I met Evelyn 2 weeks later. She was standing under the old hanging tree at the edge of Mourner's Hollow, running her fingers across its bark like she was reading Braille. "You hear them too?" she asked, without turning around. I nodded. Her smile was sad. I used to think I was losing my mind, but it's not insanity. It's invitation. I asked her what she meant. She told me her brother was taken 10 years ago, walked into the woods one night, and never came back. They'd searched, but there was nothing, no body, no blood, just his hoodie caught on a thorn bush. For years, she thought he'd just run away. Then, 3 nights ago, she heard his voice in a dream. He said, "The forest kept me safe. Now it needs you too." Evelyn looked at me, eyes gleaming with a faint gold light. "We've been chosen, you and I, not to survive, but to remember. The spiral isn't just a symbol, it's a path, a process. We're part of it now." I didn't know whether to feel terrified or honored, but part of me agreed with her. The town changed quietly, like the way dusk slips into night. Spirals began appearing on the sides of buildings, never painted, just there, grown into the concrete. Trees leaned closer to sidewalks. Street signs began twisting subtly, pointing toward trails that didn't exist on any map. And people began vanishing again, not snatched, not screaming. They walked into the trees and didn't return. Most folks ignored it, or pretended to. But those who noticed, the ones the forest called, they started gathering. I was one of them. We met at night, in the old greenhouse behind the nursery, lit only by candles and the faint bioluminescence that now bloomed in the vines there. We called ourselves the Circle of the Root. Not a cult, not exactly. More like interpreters, witnesses. We didn't worship the forest. We translated it. Evelyn would go into a trance during our meetings. Her voice would deepen, and the spirals on her arms would glow. She spoke of the old earth before mankind, of how forests once stretched across the continents, connected by root, song, and memory, of how fire and steel had broken the connection. The spiral tree was the last anchor. Its awakening was not vengeance. It was a final plea. One night, Evelyn didn't show. We searched the woods for hours. What we found was her pendant, a small acorn carved from bone, hanging from a branch. It glowed. The tree it dangled from was new. It hadn't been there the day before. We knew what it meant. She had been taken, not in punishment, in service. The spiral tree was growing again, and Evelyn had been chosen to feed it. Her memories, her blood, her voice, planted in the soil, added to the song. I cried for her, but I also envied her. After that, the forest stopped hiding. It didn't lurch into town in a wave like before. It bled through slowly. Moss on windowsills, roots buckling pavement, trees growing in parking lots, and always the spirals, in frost patterns, sidewalk cracks, even cloud formations. People tried to resist, They paved over it, cut it down, sprayed chemicals. It grew back stronger, smarter. By then, most of us knew resistance was pointless. The spiral wasn't taking over. It was reminding us what we had forgotten, that we weren't in control. We never were. The last thing I wrote in my notebook was a date, October 12th. That's when I heard the call again, clearer than ever. A spiral of light hovered in my living room, humming softly. Through it, I saw not the forest, but a memory, my mother sitting under a tree, humming an old song I hadn't heard since childhood. I walked through it. This time, it didn't feel like unraveling. It felt like going home. Part 9. I stepped to the spiral light and found myself standing beneath a colossal canopy unlike any forest I'd ever seen. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. But there was something else, an ancient pulse, a heartbeat that seemed to resonate from the very core of the world. Around me, the trees weren't just tall. They stretched beyond the horizon, their branches intertwining like a massive cathedral ceiling. The light filtering through their leaves painted shifting patterns on the forest floor, patterns that looked like symbols, spirals, and runes. In the distance, I saw figures moving, not quite human, but not animals either. They shifted between forms, sometimes bark, sometimes skin, sometimes a strange combination of both. Their eyes glowed faintly with the same green-gold light I had seen in Evelyn's and Adam's. One of them approached me, a woman with hair woven from moss and flowers, her fingers long and branch-like. She smiled gently. "Welcome, seeker," she said, voice like the rustling leaves. "You have crossed the threshold to the root realm. Few have seen it and lived to tell the tale." I swallowed hard. Where am I? What is this place? This is the Heartwood, the living memory of the forest. Here, all those taken by the trees dwell, not lost but transformed, their spirits woven into the spiral tree's endless root. She stepped closer and touched my cheek with finger as soft as bark. "You carry its seed within you. That is why you can walk here. But your journey is not over." I looked around. Why am I here? What do you want from me? She gestured toward the horizon, where the forest thinned into a shimmering veil. The spiral tree's roots have begun to spread beyond this realm, into your world. The old wounds caused by man's neglect and destruction are poisoning the root. If the corruption spreads, it will consume both worlds, the natural and the human. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. How do I stop it? By becoming the bridge. Her eyes glowed brighter. You must carry the spiral's memory back to your world, awaken others, and heal what has been broken. But it will come at a cost. You will lose part of yourself, your past, your name, your place among your people. You will become both human and forest, forever caught between worlds. I hesitated, fear and resolve battling inside me. She smiled sadly. The choice is yours. But know this, the forest does not take. It chooses those who can save it, those willing to remember. Suddenly, I felt roots wrapping gently around my ankles. They tugged me forward, pulling me deeper into the heartwood. Images flashed in my mind. Fire consuming ancient groves, children playing beneath peaceful trees, elders chanting forgotten songs, cities swallowed by creeping vines. The woman's voice echoed. "Will you walk the spiral?" I closed my eyes and nodded. I awoke back in my room. The morning sun streamed to the window, but everything felt different, heavier, thicker, alive. My skin prickled with a faint texture of bark. My breath carried the scent of pine and earth. I knew my transformation had deepened, but I was ready. Outside, the town was stirring. The spiral tree's roots had grown far beyond the woods now, curling beneath streets and homes. People passed by, unaware of the creeping change beneath their feet. I felt the forest's pulse syncing with mine. A voice whispered in my mind, not my own. Remember, heal, protect. The next days were a blur of whispered secrets and hidden meetings. I found others like me, those marked by the spiral, those who had glimpsed the heartwood. Together, we formed a new circle. Our mission, to awaken the town and protect the fragile balance between nature and humanity. We planted saplings in forgotten corners, sang ancient songs beneath the moon, and traced spirals in the dirt, symbols of connection, of memory, of life. The forest was healing, and so were we. But not everyone welcomed the change. A shadow lingered. Humans who saw the forest as a threat. They called us lunatics, cultists, terrorists. They brought chainsaws and chemicals, trying to sever the roots they didn't understand. Violence erupted. I watched as trees were cut, screams echoing through the streets. The spiral pulsed violently within me, a warning, a plea. We fought back, not with weapons, but with will. We held ceremonies, binding the forest and the people with invisible threads of hope. Slowly, some began to listen, to feel, to remember. One evening, standing beneath a great oak in the town square, I felt a presence beside me. The woman from the Heartwood. Only now, she was fully human. Her moss hair replaced by flowing green locks, eyes shining with warmth. "You have done well, seeker," she said. "But the spiral's journey is endless. It will call new hearts, weave new stories. Remember, you are both guardian and seed." I looked at her, knowing she was right. The forest and humanity were entwined now, bound by memory and sacrifice. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I felt ready. For I carried the spiral song in my veins. And the trees had chosen me. Part 10. The dawn broke over Mourner's Hollow, but it was unlike any dawn I had seen before. The sunlight filtered through a thick canopy of leaves that stretched over streets and houses, casting everything in a greenish-gold glow. The town was no longer just a collection of buildings. It had become part of the forest itself, a living tapestry woven with roots and branches. I stood in the middle of what used to be Main Street. Trees had pushed through the asphalt, their roots cracking the pavement, leaves brushing the sides of abandoned cars. The spiral patterns were everywhere now, in the bark, the moss, the very shadows that shifted on the ground. The air pulsed softly, as if the town itself was breathing. I was no longer sure where the forest ended and the town began. Neither were the others who had been chosen. We had become something new. Neither fully human nor fully tree, but something in between. People whispered stories of those who had vanished before. Tales that once inspired fear now carried a different meaning. The taken were not lost. They had been transformed, becoming part of the spiral tree's eternal memory. Their voices echoed in the rustling leaves, telling stories of love, loss, and hope. The forest was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of forgotten truths. And we were its stewards. It wasn't easy. The changes inside me were constant, a slow melding of flesh and bark, blood and sap. My senses sharpened. I could feel the pulse of every root and branch connected to the spiral tree, hear the whispers of the wind through the leaves, taste the sweetness of morning dew on my tongue. I could no longer live as I had before. But I didn't want to. The past, the fears, the doubts, faded like autumn leaves in the wind. What remained was a purpose. Our circle had grown, from skeptics to believers, from frightened townsfolk to guardians. We worked to protect the fragile balance between human life and the wild pulse of nature. We planted trees where there had been none, healed wounds inflicted by careless hands, and sang songs that bridged two worlds. At night, the spiral tree shimmered, its roots weaving unseen beneath the earth, binding us all together in a network of life and memory. Sometimes, when the moon was high, I felt the presence of those taken before, Adam, Evelyn, and countless others, guiding us, reminding us that this was a cycle, not an end. But the outside world was watching. News crews arrived, cameras rolling, eager to capture the haunted forest that had swallowed a town. Scientists debated theories, government sent investigators, and conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. They didn't understand. They saw the spiral tree as a threat, as a problem to be solved. But the spiral was neither good nor evil. It was a force of nature, ancient, relentless, and necessary. It reminded us of our place. One evening, as I wandered through the newly grown forest paths, I found a small child sitting beneath a sapling, tracing a spiral in the dirt. She looked up at me, eyes wide and curious. "Will the trees take me too?" she asked. I smiled gently, kneeling beside her. "The trees don't take," I said softly. "They choose. And when they do, it's because you belong, because you are part of the story." She nodded, a quiet understanding settling between us. Will I see them again? The ones the trees took. Yes, I said. They live in the roots, the wind, the stars. They're never really gone. I returned home that night and looked at the spiral carved into the wooden doorframe, the mark I had made when this all began. I traced it with my fingers and felt the pulse beneath the surface, the heartbeat of the forest and of Mourner's Hollow. I thought about everything we had lost and everything we had gained. The spiral tree had taken much, but it had given more. It had reminded us that we are not separate from nature, but part of it, that life is a cycle of growth and decay, of memory and forgetting, and that sometimes, to find ourselves, we must be willing to lose everything. The wind stirred outside, carrying the scent of pine and earth. A whisper followed, soft and clear. Remember. I closed my eyes and listened. The trees were alive, and so was I.